Today we're going to be talking about one of nature's most sought-after fungi, which is chaga. Chaga is a parasitic fungus that grows predominantly on birch trees, and it grows in colder climates in the northern hemisphere. It's highly sought after due to its reputation for being a nutrient-packed superfood. The exterior of chaga resembles a hunk of burnt charcoal that is very woody in texture and appearance and is very black in color, while the inside is more of a corky texture and is a rusty golden color. Chaga is also commonly referred to as black gold. This is because of its colors as well as its notoriously hefty price tag. Chaga has a parasitic relationship with its host tree. A parasitic relationship is when one party benefits while the other one suffers. Chaga spores are carried by the wind to find a host, which are primarily birch trees. Once the spores reach the host, they enter the tree through a wound, typically through damaged bark or a broken branch. The chaga feeds off the tree's nutrients, which kills the tree from the inside out. Chaga is incredibly slow growing, and it can take 5 to 20 years to reach a harvestable size. Chaga is fatal to the tree, and the tree will eventually die as a result of the chaga. However, this process can take decades, even over 80 years. Once the tree has died, it's only then that the chaga fungus can produce its spore-producing parts, which will then release spores that'll be carried by the wind to infect another host. Since chaga does not produce spores during the duration of their host tree being alive, which, as we know now, can be quite a few decades of time, and those spores can only enter a new host through a wound in a very species-specific tree in a very geographically restricted location, chaga is considered to be quite uncommon and is said to only occur in about 1 in every 4,000 to 10,000 trees. Another factor that adds to chaga's rarity is that it cannot be domestically cultivated and it can only grow in the wild. So taking all of these things into consideration, you can see why it comes with a pretty hefty price tag at the health food stores. So if you can find and forage chaga for free, you're winning. If we're going to talk about chaga, we're going to have to talk about the 3 major chaga myths. Myth number 1, chaga only grows on birch trees. This is completely false. While chaga predominantly grows on birch trees and are most commonly found growing on birch trees, they do also grow on other types of trees as well, especially trees within the birch family. As you can see from my video here, I did find chaga, and it is definitely not a birch tree that it's growing on. Myth number 2, chaga should only be harvested in winter. This is also completely false because chaga can be harvested at any time of the year. Chaga does not share a vascular system with its host tree, so there's no higher concentration of beneficial nutrients at any given point in the year. There's no specific season that chaga has a higher concentration of beneficial nutrients. The only real benefit to harvesting chaga in the winter is that it's easier to spot without the foliage. And myth number 3, you have to leave some chaga behind on the tree after harvest so that the chaga can continue to grow and regenerate. This is another completely false statement. It doesn't matter how much chaga you harvest from the tree, whether you take some or all, the chaga will grow back. The mycelium that's within the tree is not affected by harvesting the fruiting body, which is the chaga. The mycelium will continue to do its job, and it will continue to cause the chaga to grow. You have to keep in mind that chaga grows incredibly slowly. As I said before, it takes about 5 to 20 years for it to reach a harvestable size. So it's very possible that some people might think that harvesting too much chaga does affect it being able to grow back, when in reality, it's just a very slow-growing fungus and it just needs to take its time. But rest assured, no matter how much of the chaga that you harvest, the chaga will continue to grow back until it completes its life cycle. Chaga is extremely high in antioxidants and also contains properties that supports the immune system, regulates blood pressure, brings down cholesterol, aids with digestive health and skin health, and also potentially aids with cancer therapy. It's super important to mention that there hasn't actually been enough human research studies conducted to prove that these are true benefits to consuming chaga. And there are some risks associated with consuming chaga. If you consume too much chaga too frequently, you're risking developing kidney stones or other kidney issues, and you also shouldn't consume chaga if you're on blood thinners. When it comes to lookalikes, chaga is only really ever confused for wood burls. Although tree burls do have a woody appearance, they're not going to have that dark black color on the exterior or the golden color on the interior. They're also not going to detach from the tree very easily. It's not advisable to harvest chaga off a dead tree. Once the host tree is no longer viable, neither is the chaga. Chaga is most commonly consumed from dried powdered form. It's usually steeped into a tea or a coffee. If you are fortunate enough to find some chaga, I recommend that you break it up into really small pieces while it's still moist. Once that chaga chunk hardens, it's hard as rock and you won't be able to work with it much. So while it's still moist, break it up into tiny little pieces, let those dry out completely. Once they're dry, put them in a grinder, grind them into a fine powder, store them in an airtight jar, and then you can use it however you like. Since chaga is very bitter, you wouldn't just consume it as is. So typically it is mixed into a coffee or a tea. You wouldn't just be eating pieces of chaga. My favorite way to consume chaga is to actually make a syrup because the sweetness of the syrup really balances out the bitterness of the chaga. What's really convenient about making a chaga syrup is that you can bypass the whole step of having to grind it into a powder because we're going to steep the chunks as is. So now I'm going to hike out of the woods, we're going to go back to the kitchen, and I'm going to show you how to make a batch of chaga syrup.